Folks, if you're ever in Pennsylvania, Allentown, Pennsylvania, this is the place to be. I'm standing with at this time with Bud Carson of Pro Wrestling World, a wrestling historian. Wouldn't you say, Bud?
Yeah, I've been into this since the late 60s, 1968. It was my first wrestling show I saw on television. It was the WWF back then, and I was hooked ever since.
And your favorite all-time wrestler? I know who it is, but tell everybody else.
Bruno Sammartino, the living legend. Just the man I've met many times. I spent time with Bruno. He's a man of integrity and dignity, and really motivated me to be that kind of a person too, and run my wrestling store the way he would do it. Fairly, treat people with respect. Even as you know, if you're around the wrestling community, there's people with special needs. Treat them special, and that's how we've been doing this for 20 years.
And you always treat me special, Bud.
Well, you're a special person, Andrew.
And Bud, how did you get the name Pro Wrestling World, and how did the store originate?
Well, actually, we started out as a baseball card store. It was called Carson Sports Cards, and this was all about 96, 97 when the Attitude Era came upon us, and had a couple wrestling items in the store, and then people kept asking me, hey, can you get me this? Can you get me that? And that was working better than the baseball card stuff. So what happened was eventually we decided, hey, there's nothing like this. I mean, there's some stores that have sports memorabilia and wrestling stuff, but there's no full-time wrestling store around. So with a conversation with my wife, she kind of didn't want me to do it, but it worked. We turned it into a full-time wrestling store, and it worked.
And it does work. Bless her heart. I mean, you're open Fridays, Saturday, and Sunday, and I've been in here many times. And a lot of people don't know this, but you make custom rings. You also do custom framing. Talk about that.
Well, we're diversified. If we have one product and one product only, it's going to get very boring. But we have friends, like example, Rodney Evans does the rings that you were talking about. My son TJ does the matting and framing. So together, and again, I didn't build this by myself. I had lots of help from lots of people. Together, we put it all together with the hand of God, having his hand on everything, and it just evolved.
And now, who are some of the wrestlers that you first booked in the store?
The first wrestler I ever had in my store was Bruno Sammartino. I went up to Queens to meet Bruno at Jack Ballin's store. You know, Jack Wrestling Universe. There's a good story behind the Wrestling Universe, too. And I met Bruno, and his agent at that time was Jonathan Gold. And we brought Bruno in. It was Super Bowl Sunday, 1999. Funny story about that, the WWE's over at Stable Arena, which is in Bethlehem, the night before, and it snowed, like a foot of snow. And what was happening was I was panicking. This was my first autograph signing ever, and it's Bruno Sammartino, and it's snowing like crazy outside. But and it's Super Bowl Sunday, too, the next day. So I'm thinking, oh, man, we're going to take a bath on this one. But by the time Bruno got there, all the snow was gone. And Bruno came and went hours before the Super Bowl even came on, so it was a good day, and that started the ball rolling. The next we had the Bushwhackers. As you know, Luke is still around, but Butch is very sick, and we've been trying to get them together again. Sort of like if the Road Warriors, Animal's not as big as if he was with Hawk.
Oh, there's a good story there with Hawk and Animal. You want to share that with everybody else you told me?
Yeah. Well, I had the Road Warriors booked here to do an autograph signing, and about a month out, Animal called me up and said, hey, Bud, I can't make it because I'm doing a religious retreat with Ted DiBiase in, I think he said Oklahoma City. I said, well, who am I to argue with a religious retreat? You know, this is God's work, but do you want Hawk by himself? And I said, no, the Road Warriors aren't the Road Warriors without Hawk and Animal. About a couple months later, that summer, Hawk died, and I could have kicked myself in the butt because I could have got Hawk to sign a whole bunch of stuff and then Animal to sign a whole bunch of stuff later, and now a Road Warriors picture signed by both of them is worth about $200, hands down. So you miss out
No,
on.
I bought one here for 150. You gave me a great deal on that.
I always do.
He's a great man. He's a great man.
what I love, I'm gonna take care of you.
Now, you also didn't you tell me you met Vince McMahon Sr. at one time?
I met Vince McMahon Sr. at Agricultural Hall, it was a short drive from here. It's just on the other side of town, and I didn't have much time to talk to him. But one thing I remembered about Vince Sr. was when he's mad at somebody, he had a stack of quarters and he would be playing. No, it was silver dollars. He'd be playing with his silver dollars, sorting them out, and that's my Vince Sr. story.
What's the most expensive thing that you've sold out of this store, bud?
I don't know. The most expensive thing, probably a video game. I forget which one it was. I think it was a Battle Royale video game I sold for $1,000.
You ever get some things and say, you know what, this is pretty cool, I'm gonna take it home?
Yeah, but when the rent's due, you think otherwise.
One of those, and then the wife says this has got to go.
Yeah, my wife, wonderful, lovely person, my best friend and the best person I know, but she don't understand the wrestling thing, and I'm okay with that because this is something that we don't share that makes me unique in the ways that I'll go home and say, hey, I just bought this or I just sold this, and she won't have no clue what I'm talking about, but she understands my passion. And I'm going to say this, and this is so important. People get a passion for something, whether it's sports, music, the Bible, Matchbox collection. Get a passion for something. It'll keep you going.
Now, you said, you mentioned that there was a story about our good friend Jack at Wrestling Universe. Do you want to share that?
Yeah. Jack used to have a comic book store. And when I switched my store from Carson Sports Cards to Pro Wrestling World, Jack trumped me and went to Pro Wrestling Universe. Now, what's next? Pro Wrestling Galaxy? Pro Wrestling what? Is this something me and Jack are going to keep battling back and forth? Who's got the bigger name? But Jack's got a great store, too. If you ever been up there, yes, up in Queens, yeah. And Jack's like me. If you love this, he's going to take care of you. Well, he's going to take care of you regardless.
You've given me a lot better deals than he has, but he's a good guy, too.
Jack's a good guy. He's one of the pioneers. We've been around for 20 years. And like I said, that's where I met Bruno Sammartino for the first time. And one of the great things about this business rather than the sports business, compare the greatest wrestler of all time that's still alive, which is Bruno Sammartino, to Willie Mays, the greatest baseball player of all time who's still alive. I'm very close to Bruno. Willie Mays I've never met, nor I would think Willie Mays would have time for me. But Bruno does. Bruno has time to talk to me on the phone. When we see him out in public, he talks to me. We're genuine friends. The neat thing in this business, and I can be very proud of this right now, is two things. The greatest wrestler of all time, Bruno Sammartino, I'm friends with. The greatest wrestler, I think, right now is AJ Styles, and I'm good friends with him, too. It's kind of like...
It's funny you mention both because... AJ Styles I don't know very well, but Bruno I do know very well, not as much as you do. But the thing I like about Bruno, probably, and you could attest to this, is that Bruno is a very humble guy.
Absolutely.
Bruno is the most humble, and you would think like somebody that has even 10% of the amount of success he has would have such a big head. But the guy who carries himself like a true champion.
Yes, and that's the mark of a champion, being humble. And Bruno understands the fact that without us, he wouldn't be Bruno Sammartino. Without us buying tickets to Madison Square Garden every month, Bruno wouldn't have been able to sell it out. And he understands that, and he appreciates his fans.
You mentioned AJ Styles. You had AJ here in the store as well.
Yeah, a few times we've had AJ. Again, a very humble, very friendly Southern guy. He's from Georgia, and a neat story with AJ is I know he likes wearing hats, so I gave him a hat one time, and his father was a Marine. His father was a Marine down on Camp Lejeune the same time I was down on Camp Lejeune, and actually AJ was born on Camp Lejeune when I was down there, and I was like, AJ, I could be your dad, and I was joking, of course, and again there was that little twist of bonding between us. Now, AJ calls me about once a year, and I know he's out so busy with the WWE right now. Is he still champion?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
He's had a tremendous year. He started out the Royal Rumble with a big pop, and now he's still the world champ.
I didn't expect him to be world champion this quick, but I knew he was going to be world champion. He's just, to me, the best wrestler in the world.
He certainly deserves it. Who's the biggest guest that you've had here with the biggest turnout? Would you say Hall and Nash?
Hall.
Scott Hall alone.
Hall by himself. We had Hall and Nash together, but they didn't draw that like Hall did by himself. Oh, wow. Yeah, that was a crazy day, indeed. Actually, the only history that we've ever had where we had to turn people away.
For Scott Hall.
For Scott Hall, yeah.
And was this his recent appearance, or was?
Within the last 2 or 3 years, we didn't prepare for Scott Hall to draw like that. But we did pre-sell tickets, and I highly recommended people to get their pre-sell tickets because you get to the front of the line, you don't have to wait, and you get your numbered ticket to where, okay, if you're number 5 and you come late, you still get in the line at number 5 spot. And you get your tickets cheaper too. And a lot of people didn't do that, so the people at the end of the line, they didn't get to see them.
Who's your dream guest here that you've never had but you wish you could book here?
Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty's gone. But I worked hard on getting Dusty to come up here. Dusty didn't come north a lot. He lived in Florida and stayed in Florida and did his work in Florida. He didn't come up north that much. And the last time he was here, it was only a matter of days after he was here that he passed away.
And what other guests could we expect to see here in Allentown?
I'm hoping the Nature Boy we'll see very shortly because he's high on my list of coming here, and I think he'd love the place. Jim Cornette's another guy I would love to get up here because I know Jim is a big fan of professional wrestling.
I could listen to Jim Cornette read a phone book.
Yeah, he's great. Here's two good Jim Cornette stories if we have time. We were doing a show in Philadelphia called the Eddie Gilbert Memorial. Remember?
Right.
They used to do them, and there was a big table full of old wrestling magazines from the 60s. My friend, who's now passed on, Glenn Brown, they were his father's, and he was selling them. So I went in there, and I bought a whole bunch of them, and then walked around the convention floor, and I didn't see nothing else that I really liked. So I went back to Glenn's table to buy some more wrestling magazines. Here Jim Cornette's there, buying wrestling magazines. He had a stack from the floor about up to his chest, buying with all these old wrestling magazines, and had 2 kids. He paid them $20 each to take them out to his car, and I got to talk to him. Said, "You must be a big wrestling fan." Now, I didn't know Jim Cornette at the time. I got to know him better over the years, and he is a huge wrestling fan. He knows his history almost as good as me. Second Jim Cornette story, we're down in Charlotte doing a convention, and they were doing a Q&A with Jim Cornette and Bobby Eaton. And the Insane Clown Posse showed up, and they were bad-mouthing Jim Cornette, why he doesn't like the Insane Clown Posse. And Cornette went off, "No talent bunch of da-da-da-da-da." And Juggalo, I think is his name, approached Jim, and Bobby Eaton stood up. Juggalo backed off. Bobby Eaton had Jim's back, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I get to witness this down in Charlotte. You ever been to the Charlotte shows?
No, I have not.
They're different. They're different from up here. People down in North Carolina are very laid back and compared to the New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania contingent that are very uptight.
Now, before we go, is there any wrestler you want to bury? Is there anybody wrestler that was here that you just wanted to say, you know what, get the hell out of here. I don't want you around my fans. You're just disrespectful. You're rude.
Andrew, that's not my nature. You know that.
I know that.
No, there's not.
We don't
I mean, you.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Get
out of here.
Well, that's our time, folks. We'll see you next time. I'm with Bud Carson, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Pro Wrestling World.